Today. Thanks for coming out. Okay, we're good to go. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out. My name is Doug, and this is Leaving the Dream. Today, we are going to be talking about the tragedy that took place in Uvalde, Texas. Normally, I do my lives later, but because it's a weekend, I'm going to go ahead and do them now, and everybody can catch up on the lives. I am by no means an expert in what happened at the Robb Elementary School. That is for sure. This will not be a comprehensive survey of the events that happened. That's not what this is going to be. We still do not know everything. We still do not have a complete understanding of the events that happened that day. So I'm going to be talking about the things that we think that we understand as of today, June 4th, 2022. We will continue to learn things about this incident. Some of the things that we think that we know for sure, we will find out in the coming days and weeks was not true at all. And the things that we think didn't happen, we will find out in the coming days and weeks that they did happen. It's a very common thing to happen, guys. So I just want to be upfront and clear about that. We do not know everything that happened. So until then, we're just going to talk about the things that we think happened as of today. Also, I do want to say that we're looking back. We are looking backwards in time, in hindsight. So we all think we know what we would have done if we were there. But I can assure you, we do not know what we would have done. That goes for you and that goes for me. I heard a news anchor interviewing the father of, or the husband of one of the teachers who actually went in there. He was actually a father of a student who ended this whole thing. And I heard her say, and she was trying to be kind, but she told him, I would have done exactly what you did. And even though her answer was in the affirmative, you know, normally you hear people say like, that's not what I would have done. I would have rushed in. So it's easy for me to be critical about those guys because they think they know what they would do. But it's hard sometimes when we would even say that about people that are saying the same things we're saying. I sympathize with her. I think I would have done what that father did, and we'll get into that later. But it was arrogant of her to say, I would have done what you had have done. It's just not the same. It is just not the same. When you're not there, you think you would have done something, you have no idea. Some of us would have just peed in our pants and sat there and done nothing. Some of us would have rushed in and got shot. Some of us would have went and grabbed help. Some of us would have made other calls. We have no idea what would have happened. And until you do it, you don't know. And so I want to acknowledge that first. The things that I'm going to say today are in hindsight looking back. We also know things that the people on scene did not know at that time. So it's really, really important to just have a great understanding of human nature and how we all lack perspective. We were not there. So anybody who insists they know what they would have done, unless they're a trained professional and have actually done it before, you're only assuming what you would have done. This applies to me as well. So I just want to get that out of the way. If we've not been in those shoes, we have no idea what we would have done. My Patreon, I'm going to post photos of like the area and things to help gain some perspective. Also some of my notes and references. You'll be able to find that in the Patreon feed. So big shout out to all you patrons. And before we get started, I just want to say what's up to everybody who's hitting up the chat right now. Tater Monkey, what's up? James Kisselberg, what's up, dude? Glad you came out. That's a hero. That's a real live hero right there. All you guys that see that James Kisselberg in the chat right now, real live hero. If you're watching this video later, I'm going to leave a link right here. And you can go ahead and watch the video about his heroic acts that caught a murderer who still has not been brought to justice. That dude also took 2 bullets to the neck. You're a hero, James. Thanks for coming out, man. It's an honor to see you as always. Love you, bro. Jay Tuck, Tia Lisa Fernandez, Kavehi, Doug Uemoro. What's up? How you guys doing? Thanks for coming out. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so if you do a basic search of the things that happen, you will find thousands of articles. You will find hundreds of videos, and you can go to Wikipedia. And so let's just talk about what we can find here on Wikipedia as an overall breakdown. These things, like I said, will change, and we'll deal with those as they come. I will probably do update videos on this. We'll probably be talking about this for a long time. Also, I will not be saying the name of the shooter. He doesn't deserve that. We don't ever want to remember him. We want to forget that fool. I will just call him as the suspect. And then we will talk about the victims. I will name them. And anything you guys can do to support, whether it's giving, there's a lot of like GoFundMes and things like that. Just make sure you do your research and you're finding the right ones that are bona fide so that if you want to help. All right, so here's an overall breakdown of what happened in case you've been living under a rock. On May 24, 2022, an 18-year-old suspect, who I won't say his name, fatally shot 19 students and 2 teachers and wounded 17 other people at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Earlier in that day, he shot his grandmother in the forehead. Think about it. First of all, it's a forehead shot. And second of all, it's a grandmother. What a crazy scenario. She's severely wounded. I do not think she's passed away. I don't know if anybody can confirm that, but I don't have anything that said that she passed away. She was severely wounded as of today. And then outside the school, he fired shots for approximately 5 minutes, which is an eternity. 5 minutes, guys. 300 seconds. He fired shots before entering unobstructed with an AR-15 through the unlocked side entrance door of the school. Then he locked himself inside a classroom and then killed 19 students and 2 teachers and then remained there for an hour before a member of the United States Border Patrol Tactical Unit, we call him BORTAC, fatally shot him. Thank God for that guy. You are a hero. And listen, I've heard some people try to take this away from him because he had a wife and a child at that school. I'm telling you guys, it doesn't just take a guy to run into a room and shoot the killer. That's something you see on movies. When that guy stood there at the door, knowing that this was the third largest ever mass shooting, largest in Texas history, with a dude who had a much higher powered weapon and has zero regard for life, an absolute mass murderer, that man stacked up on that door and busted through that fatal funnel. And there is nothing scarier. I have never stacked up and cleared a room after someone had murdered 19 people, 21 people. I have stacked up and entered rooms, not knowing what was on the other side of that door. And I can tell you that it is so scary. There's like a 5-foot zone, this fatal funnel where you're standing inside or in front of the doorway. You don't know what's on the other side of that door, and to break through that threshold and bust that door open and then go to the right or the left or however they dominated the room, which I'm sure we'll find out later. It is so scary, and I've never done it after someone had already murdered people. I've done it looking for guys that I didn't know who they were or if they had a gun or whatever. And I'm telling you, just in that, there's this rush that comes over you, and you are in a fight or flight response. And unless you've done it over and over and over and over and over again, you're going to code black. And so for what I don't care, that kid, everyone's like, yeah, but he had a son or a wife in there. Of course he's going to do that. You have no idea what you're talking about. That just adds more to it. you're not just thinking about neutralizing the target. See, the guys who bust through those rooms, they have to assume that they're sacrificing themselves. I need you to wrap your head around that concept. When you bust through that door, especially the first 3 guys, every one of them knows that, hey, he's going to start shooting. He knows where we're coming in. There's no guess. He's probably got his muzzle trained on that door. And when that comes through, he just starts shooting. And we'll talk about the concepts of room entry and dominating the space and how it works. But man, I just want to say that guy's a hero. Thank you, sir, for what you did. I know you saved I know that your wife was across the street, but you wanted to save your daughter, but you saved all those other kids. Who knows what happened? And so I'm grateful for that dude. What a hero. We should celebrate him forever. So this was the 3rd deadliest school shooting in the U.S. after the Virginia Tech shooting in 2007 and after Sandy Hook in 2012. So that's about every 5 years. Actually, it's been 10 years since Sandy Hook. This was the deadliest in Texas history. Of course, the LEOs have been criticized for their actions in response to the shooting, and rightfully so. There's a lot of things that, as of now, what we think we know went wrong. But I can tell you, even on that, it's a multi-tiered, multifaceted command chain. You have to understand that you cannot just disregard your chain of command, which I think is one of the reasons why this played out the way it did. That BORTAC agent was not under the command of the police chief of Uvalde. So he didn't have chain of command issues. And I can assure you guys that if you have anybody who's been in the military, you'll understand this. Chain of command is important and saves lives. However, when you have a chain of command that makes calls that are not appropriate or are ill-informed, uneducated, or just wrong, it does cost lives. But as a whole, you need that chain of command to save lives, typically. And I think right now what I'm leaning towards is that we lost some of that. And so the reason why so many kids may have died is because of the decision-making process. But also, we're gonna talk about the timeline. The timeline is very important. It's how many kids died before those decisions were made and how many died after those decisions were made. So that's what I mean. This is a big soup that we're gonna have to settle later as we find out more information. There is an investigation being done right now by the Texas Ranger Division and by the U.S. Department of Justice. So it is still being investigated. We're going to hear about this for at least a year. That's I expect at least a year of investigations before they start handing down disciplinary actions and that kind of stuff. Right now, we have that police officers waited 78 minutes on site before breaching the classroom to engage the suspect. They also cordoned off school grounds, but that becomes an issue too, because we had a lot of public on scene. The fact that the public was allowed so close to this school because of the craziness, there were violent conflicts between the officers and civilians who were attempting to enter the school to rescue their children. You cannot blame those people. There's been some things brought up with why the BORTAC agent was able to come in the school and other people weren't. I think it's neither here nor there. We're glad he was sent in, no? That dude went in and saved some lives and he was trained. Everybody knew him. I guess Uvalde is a really small town. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knew this dude was a BORTAC agent and that he had a daughter there. No one stopped him. And thank God for that. Afterwards, local and state officials gave inaccurate reports of the timeline of police actions. That is not entirely out of the ordinary or surprising. This is a crazy thing that's happening. And there's a lot of things that we learned about this incident that would have added to the chaos and would have also added to the confusion. Apparently, the police department overstated police actions. That doesn't necessarily mean anyone was trying to mislead with those statements, but it may have been that they were just inaccurate. So we don't know yet. We'll figure that out. But the Texas Department of Safety, the DPS in Texas, did acknowledge that it was an error for law enforcement to delay the assault on the suspect's position in the student-filled classroom. So they have admitted that was the mistake. So we can officially say that People on scene who were there, who have investigated, have already said that this was a mistake to delay. Apparently attributing this to the police chief of the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District. So, what's up, Nate? They have a police chief that is in charge of the Uvalde Consolidated School System. They have, I think it was 6 police officers in charge of 8 schools. So they have their own, which is crazy to think about. People in Hawaii, it's hard for you guys to understand how that works because we don't have a police department for our schools. We just have the Honolulu Police Department, which runs the island of Oahu or Honolulu County. And then you have like the sheriffs who run the airport and the prison. And then we have some DLNR who run like the waters and mountain and the hunting, that kind of stuff. So it's a weird concept, but they do have a police. There's a police department that's specifically over the consolidated school system. So let's talk about Uvalde. It's a Hispanic majority city. There's about 16,000 people. I'm guessing that'll fit the Blaisdell. Like that's the whole city. And they're in the South Texas region. They're 60 miles above the border. So 60 miles from the Mexico border, 85 miles from San Antonio, if you're wondering where it was at. 90% of Robb Elementary's 600 students in the 2nd through 4th grades were Hispanic. 81% of the student population came from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. On the day of the shooting, there had been an award ceremony at the school. So we know that there was an award ceremony that day at the school. Man, end of the school year, just tragic all the way around. It's just a tragic thing. It's horrible. So let me also say, in case something happens and the video gets disconnected or we forget, my family and I are praying for the families of those victims, and we're gonna do what we can, try to donate what we can. It's just, there's nothing more heartbreaking to anybody. And I can assure you, as a police officer, they were thinking about that with the shooting at the school. So apparently, the city of Uvalde spent 40% of its municipal budget on its police department in the 19 and 20 school year, which is not surprising. I think the Honolulu Police Department is the largest expenditure on the city budget. That does include the Consolidated Independent School District. So apparently they had multiple security measures in place at the time of the shooting. We're going to talk about what those were. The school district had 6 officer police department responsible for security at all 8 of the schools. So apparently you can't have one at every one of the schools. They probably had to do some type of rotation. I think that would have been based on like attendance, based on when certain people get out and are doing certain things. You probably want police officers there when people are out at lunchtime and thinking like that. So I do think that will probably change. I am a fan of police in schools. What's up, Lay? Thanks for coming out. Good morning, where you're at. So I am a fan of police officers in the schools, and I think that's going to change here. I am not sure about the police officer here. We're going to talk about that a little bit, about what happened actually at the school. They had extensive security measures in place, and apparently the school was very prepared for this. There was even a training recently regarding, the annual training that police departments typically get about school shootings or mass shootings, things like that. So there was a lot of training in place at the school. They had a lot of safety measures in place. So the school uses this, it's like a program, it's an online program called Social Sentinel. And it's a software that they upload, and they probably contract out to like a monitoring company or somebody like that who actually monitors the social media accounts of students and other Uvalde affiliated people to identify threats made against students or staff. Pretty crazy when you think about it. I will also say that if they can do that to students, imagine what they can do to you. You probably are being monitored. There's easy things to do, like placing cookies on your phone, things like that. So they actually use Social Sentinel to try to keep an eye on it. So they're spending the appropriate money. This wasn't for lack of preparation in this school. The district had a written security plan for something like this. And it was called the Raptor Visitor Management System. That's what they use. It scans visitor IDs and checks them in with against watch lists that they already have written. What's up, Stan? How you doing, bro? Thanks for coming out. As well as the use of two-way radios, fence enclosures around campus, school threat assessment teams, and a policy of locking the doors of the classrooms. So, this was kind of like a perfect storm. It seems like everywhere there was a plan, everywhere there was preparation, there was a breakdown. And I hate to say it like this, but sometimes people get lucky. And every time one person gets lucky, someone else is unlucky. And I'm telling you, as a police officer, one of the most frustrating things for me was learning to live with the fact that criminals got lucky and cops always got unlucky when we were searching for them. It would be the case of someone burgs a house, the person is in the house in the bedroom, hears someone burg their house, calls 911, gets plenty of time. The guy even stays in the house extra long until the officer gets there. But the officer pulls up on the left side of the house. The suspect, completely unaware of the police pulling up on the left side of the house, hop out of the right side of the house. All the responding officers come in from the east. The suspect runs to the west. When the cop turns left, the suspect runs right and just gets away. Of course, there's a lot of other times where the officers drive right past the suspect who's walking away from the property because they weren't thinking about exit routes. So like stuff like that happens too, but you would not believe sometimes how it just goes right for the suspect. And in this case, the door was left unlocked when they have a policy of locking them. That's a frustrating part that police officers have to play, and you know it. You start going crazy a little bit because you're driving to a scene thinking, I know I'm going to pull up on the wrong side. So I better start looking now. So you start looking as you're driving in, you start looking for people walking around. So I think that there's an aspect to this as well. Aloha from Big Island. Aloha, bro. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming out. Good morning over there in Hawaii. On top of all this, guys, the consolidated school system actually held joint security training exercises in August, about 18 months ago, along with the Uvalde Police Department, the Uvalde County Sheriff's Department, and other local law enforcement agencies. They hosted an active shooter scenario training, which people in Hawaii are very familiar with. A lot of you guys volunteer to be actors during those training seminars, which thank you guys for that because it really helps us. Well, you'll actually take a school over the weekend. So when I worked in District 1 on patrol, which is in town in Honolulu, I was working Sector 2 one day. In my sector, which is the mountain above Honolulu, we had an active shooter training at one of the schools on my beat. So I would leave my beat, and my beat partners would have to cover me off. Somebody would have to cover my sector. And I would go into the training. I would go drive up to the school where police officers had already set it up. There was actors that were there who had fake blood on them, and you know, the whole deal. It would be like, this is real deal. And they'd have EMS on scene as well, fire on scene. And so, because they tried to recreate what it would really be in real life. So we would always go to these, and it would be like every 3 years for certain programs and every 2 years for others. We had MAC-TAC and a bunch of other things that we would do. And it was good to get the training. And so you would bring your AR or your shotgun or your pistol, whatever that you were comfortable with and you wanted to work with. And then you would respond to the scene with your beat partners, who are also the people that you would be responding to this in real life. They held one of these exercises in August. And in March of this year, they actually held active shooter training exercises. They covered solo response to active shooters, which would have come in handy, first aid and evacuation, and scenarios enacted through role playing, which is something we would have been dealing with. The exercise covered the ability to compare and contrast an active shooter situation versus a barricaded suspect or hostage crisis where an armed person isolates themselves with limited to no ability to harm others. This is the big confusion, guys. So you're going to hear a lot about this. So I just want to talk about this concept for a minute. During these trainings, you are taught, and it is very clear. It is very clear. You run towards the sound of the gunfire. If the person is shooting, you are advancing. You can hear where the gunshot's coming from, so you go that way. You're still utilizing tactical maneuvers, so but you're running by doors. You're not, typically what you'll do is that, let's say there's a gunman who broke in the school on the weekend, nobody's there, but a gunman broke in there and he's drawing crazy stuff on the walls. There's no threat. When you'll clear this school, you'll enter in the end of the hallway. You'll stack up with someone. It depends on what stack you're running. There's a lot of maneuvers that we won't talk about here. You can watch videos on these maneuvers. And you'll have one person facing down the hallway, another person that's covering the rear guard who's supposed to be facing the other end of the hallway in case somebody surprises them. And as you come up to a door, depending on which way the door swings, you guys will communicate with each other. You will tap up or squeeze up. You guys will enter that room and clear it. If there's opposing rooms, you'll have guys go and clear a room, guys go and clear the other room, meet back in the hallway. Now you own that part of the hallway. That's yours. You know those rooms are sealed off. You know those rooms are clear. You'll advance to the next 2 rooms or next room or next 3 rooms, whatever there are. You work your way down the hallway until you engage the suspect. When there's no shots being fired, you're doing this because you don't know where he's at. You can't hear any shots. You know he's in there. You think he's in there. A lot of this happens when there's like an escapee. Sometimes they'll do this in schools. I've been there where we had somebody escape or somebody commit a murder, and then all of a sudden we have to start visiting the schools in the area to make sure that he's not hiding in the school. We'll evacuate the schools and then do a head count and all that stuff. And then the thing is, once you start hearing the gunfire and you know that there's people that are being killed, you will advance down the hallway quickly. You will scan those rooms as you run by. And the person in the rear guard, he will still hold the rear, but you guys are moving quickly towards the sound of the gunfire. You get to the room and you've been able to isolate. Listen, this dude is in here. He's shooting right now. You will give your commands. Whoever the team leader is will say, this is what we're doing. We're going in, squeezing up on 3. You guys will breach that room, dominate the room, and neutralize the target. If the suspect is shooting, you are running towards him. You are not waiting at all. However, if he's shooting and you hear gunfire, I don't care if it was 100 rounds. The moment he stops firing his gun, things change. All right, guys, I want you to think about that concept. He shoots off 100 rounds. Pop, 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 all 100. You guys are running. If there's a really long hallway and those bullets stop, you guys will stop and reassess. You have to. He could be out of bullets. He could just be reloading. He could have left the room and entered another room or another hallway or in the roof. So for you just to run in would be foolhardy if no one's being hurt. But where things change is if he has been showing that he's been shooting children and then he stops shooting for a few seconds, but you know there are many more children there, there's a little bit of a gray area. Now this is if there's no command involved, guys. This is if it's just you and your team who you know very well. The moment command gets involved, you have to listen to your commanders. Whoever is at the command center, whoever your watch lieutenant or captains or majors, whoever's making the call in your jurisdiction. That's where things got messy over here. So that's the things that we talk about when we're talking about active shooter training. And they just went through this March of this year where they discussed the difference between active shooter and barricaded suspect. They got their hands on the training material, which they quoted here in the Wikipedia article. And it says, time is the #1 enemy during active shooter response. The best hope that innocent victims have is that officers immediately move into action and isolate, distract, or neutralize the threat, even if that means one officer acting alone. The materials also put forth in the position that a first responder unwilling to place the lives of innocent above their own safety should consider another career field. Very well said. That's the truth. That's the truth. I will say that in this case, we don't know if someone was unwilling yet. That hasn't been sorted out. I'm willing to guess because I've worked in this industry and I've seen guys. Maybe 10%. Less than 10%. If you had a group of 10, there might be one dude who can't bring himself to go through that door. This is all theory, of course. This is all bro science, just what I'm saying. Maybe 1 out of every 10 officers you would stack up with may not have the cojones to go in there. But they also don't know that until they get thrown in that position. This is bro science for sure. But they're right. If you can't put other people's lives ahead of yours as a law enforcement officer, you should go be something else. That's just what it is, guys. And so the big point here that they talked about, which will come up later, is, hey, I don't care if you have a group that stacks up. If you solo respond to that school, you're the first one on scene. You just happen to be driving by hearing gunshots. No one called 911. You roll up, you get to the school, you hear those gunshots, you're running towards those gunshots. You will breach that room and you'll try to take out that suspect. Even if you're by yourself, you're not waiting, guys. There is also, most training will tell officers never to go in to, let's say you have an open door alarm, where the alarm goes off in a house, you get there, the door is open. This has essentially become a burglary. They always tell you don't go in. And they're right. There's no reason to go in there yet. If you're not hearing gunshots or screaming, there's no reason you have to go and just wait for your backup to arrive so that you guys can be safe. You can watch each other's back. So it's not like this is some concept where it's always run in. There are times to run in, times not to run in, times to wait for your backup, times not to wait for backup. That's real. That really happens. And so I think that's what adds to kind of the confusion in a scenario like this. It's not like you always just run in and they were just cowardice. That's not the case here. There was some strategy involved, and I think they just picked the wrong strategy, and we know that now. So the suspect and his 66-year-old grandmother had an argument over a phone bill at their home in Uvalde. So he lived in the community. That's when he shot her in the forehead before taking her Ford pickup truck. She survived that shot and sought help from neighbors while police officers were called in. She was airlifted to a hospital in San Antonio in critical condition. Talk about having a chin. She gets shot in the forehead, goes to a neighbor's. Man, that's crazy. So she lives. Using his Facebook account, he sent 3 private messages to a 15-year-old girl from Germany whom he had met online prior to the shooting. The first to say that he was going to shoot his grandmother. The second message to say that he had shot his grandmother. And the third message 15 minutes before the shooting to say that he was going to open fire at the elementary school. This kid's a sociopath. A spokesperson for Meta, the parent company of Facebook, said that the posts were private one-to-one messages discovered after the shooting took place. So this dude tells this girl that he had met, a 15-year-old girl in Germany, 3 messages. 1, I'm going to shoot my grandma. 2, I just shot my grandma. 3, I'm about to go open fire at the elementary school. The suspect crashed his grandma's truck through a barricade and into a concrete ditch outside Robb Elementary School at 11:28 a.m. Central Time. According to police, he wore a tactical vest for carrying ammo. So he had a vest on, but apparently it was just to carry the ammo. He didn't have the ballistic plate. He didn't have any ballistic protection in his vest. It was just because he could strap ammo to it. You'll have like either Velcro or you have clips and you have some type of a system that will connect magazines and extra ammo. So he wore a tactical vest that carried ammo. He had a backpack, all black clothing, while carrying an AR with 7 30-round magazines. So 210 rounds are loaded in magazines, ready to go. He brought into the school only one of the 2 rifles that he legally bought and left the other in the crashed truck. So he had two legally owned AR-15s. He left one in the truck and took the other one into the school. A witness said he first fired at two people at a nearby funeral home. Both of them escaped uninjured. So they must have been at a distance, and so he just missed them after he shot. Police reported receiving 911 calls about a vehicle having crashed near the school. So the first 911 calls that came in were of a vehicle that crashed near the school. They weren't about the actual shooting. After hearing the 911 call, a school resource officer drove to the school's campus and pursued a teacher who they erroneously believed to be the gunman, driving past the actual gunman in the process. Ugh. So, a school resource officer drove to the school after hearing the 911 call, pursued a teacher who they thought to be the gunman, driving past the actual suspect who was in action. The suspect then entered the school through its west-facing entrance door, which had been shut by a teacher who had seen him. The door did not lock, despite being designed to be locked when shut. So, here we go, guys, with our very first misunderstanding, our very first statement that can be taken out of context. If I were to tell you a teacher had just walked through that door and left it unlocked for the shooter, you would say, that's where it all started. She's the reason, or he's the reason those kids died. The statement, a teacher had just come through those doors and left the door unlocked, even though the policy is for it to remain locked. To you and I, at face value, that sounds like that person violated policy, was lax in the rules that they had provided, the rules that they had set in place, and didn't do what they were supposed to do. They were negligent. But when you learn, and this is all we have right now, who knows what will change, but when you learn that the teacher had seen the gunman and shut the door on him, and the door is supposed to lock, but the door did not lock. The Consolidated School Police Chief estimated that the shooting began at 11:32 a.m. According to a Facebook post by the school was placed on lockdown at 11:43, which is 11 minutes later, in response to gunshots heard in the facility. All right, so after entering the building, the suspect walked down two short hallways and then entered a classroom that was internally connected to another. So you have two classrooms that are connected by a doorway. We've all seen those before. A survivor of the shooting said that as teacher Irma Garcia attempted to lock the door to the classroom, he shot the door's window, then backed Garcia into the classroom and said good night as he shot and killed her. So she tried to close and lock the door as he approached the door. And he shot at the window, shattering the window. Then he backed her up at gunpoint into the classroom. This freaking guy. And then said goodnight as he shot and killed her. Another survivor recounted that Ramos said, "You're all going to die," after entering the classroom. He then opened fire on the rest of the students and another teacher in the classroom. According to a surviving student, the suspect played sad music before the shooting began. All of the fatalities, including the students and two teachers, were located in the 4th grade classroom where he locked the door. I have a 4th grader. That could have been my kids. Man, it's just messed up. So sad. All right, so the majority of the shooting occurred out or inside the building within the first few minutes. So that's the first thing that we have to understand. The first thing we got to know is, hey, most of this shooting happened before anybody ever got there. Nothing could have been done about that. The suspect was in the building for 40 to 60 minutes while armed police remained outside the classroom and building. Multiple students played dead while the shooting took place, including one 11-year-old Maya Cerillo, who smeared herself with the blood of one of her dead classmates to give credence to the... Can you imagine this, guys? An 11-year-old girl takes the blood of her dead classmate and smears it all over herself, just to make it look like she was already dead. Now, we know that active shooters, they do not care about people who play dead. They typically will shoot them on the ground. We have that one shooting that took place at the grocery store a few weeks ago, and I saw that footage. He just walks around shooting people that are on the ground. I think he knows they're playing dead, or just in case he wants to put one in them. But this girl took it one step further and actually smeared the blood of her classmate. According to a student who hid in the adjoining classroom, the suspect came in and slightly crouched down, saying it's time to die, before opening fire. Afterwards, a responding officer called out, "Yell if you need help." A girl in the adjoining classroom said, "Help." Ramos heard the girl, entered the classroom, and shot her. The student said that the officer then barged into the classroom and the suspect fired at the officer, causing more officers to return fire. Officers arrived 4 minutes after he entered the school and attempted to make entry, but they retreated after he fired at them. Officers were not successful in establishing negotiations. So, we know that officers arrived on scene 4 minutes after the suspect actually gets to the school. But they were unable to set negotiations, and they backed off once he fired at them. So, at this point, we had an active shooter. Officers on scene, including the police chief and the brass, who are probably on the phone, think that this is a barricaded situation at this point. So the people on scene, that's what they're thinking. All right, so U.S. Marshals deputies drove nearly 70 miles to the school and arrived at 12:10 p.m., where they helped officers initially confront the shooter, rendering first aid and securing a perimeter. Now, the Consolidated School District officers, they sent out a message on Twitter that there was an active shooter at the elementary school. The school district's police chief, Pedro Pete Arredondo, erroneously determined that the situation had transitioned from an active shooter to a barricaded suspect. This is what we're talking about earlier. At this point, we had the active shooter. The police chief erroneously decides and informs his department that we are now at a barricaded suspect situation. And they're admitting this was wrong. They've already admitted that. With the suspect thought to be contained, officials believe they had bought enough time to bring in tactical units. First responding officers had insufficient manpower and were unable to enter the classroom, and they instead evacuated children and teachers by breaking windows around the school. Okay, so that kind of gets rid of the idea, like this picture that they stood around doing nothing. Typically, you do not stop for injured. You do not evacuate. Typically, as you're advancing into the suspect, you will tell the people to go that way. Go that way towards the ambulance. Follow all those students. Keep running. Don't move. You're trained to say those things as you're heading in. And that's typically what people are doing. So if you're already at a point where your police chief tells you, yo, this is a barricaded suspect, we're not talking active shooter anymore, we want you to get people out, there are people that are bleeding that need help, get them out, evacuate them. That's where we're going. That's what they're doing. They have to obey what they were told by their commander. That's the idea. After the police cordoned the outside of the school, parents pleaded with officers to enter the building. When they didn't, parents offered to enter the building themselves. Officers held back and tackled parents who tried to enter the school. This may seem barbaric. And knowing what we know now, that they had misclassified this as a barricaded suspect, it does seem like police officers didn't want anyone to help. But that's not the case. They had just worked, they'd gotten to this point, we know there were students that were dead, we had saved a bunch of students, evacuated them from the building, just to have more people run into the building where they had assumed there wasn't a threat anymore to the immediate lives of the students. And any further action by the police department to either aggravate or cause this guy to start shooting again might cost more life. So that's what they're thinking at the time. Further warning the parents that they would use tasers if the parents didn't comply with directions. Video clips were uploaded on social media, including one that depicted a parent being pinned to the ground. Police pepper sprayed a parent trying to get to their child, and an officer tackled a father. Police reportedly used a taser on a parent who approached a bus to get their child. And a mother of 2 students at the school was placed in handcuffs by officers for attempting to enter the school. When released from those handcuffs, she jumped the fence and retrieved her children, exiting before police entered. A video clip showed parents questioning why police were not trying to save their children, to which an officer replies, "Because I'm having to deal with you," which, might I add, is probably true, guys. I know it sounds heartless. But when you have officers that have to set a perimeter, it's a part of the process of how they've trained, and you're trying to break through it, that makes other officers have to come help get you off of them and get you past the perimeter when they should be focusing on other things. But you can't blame the parents. Their kids are inside there and they think, why aren't you going in to get him? Of course, they don't know that the police chief has given them orders and already classified this as a barricaded suspect. They don't know any of this stuff. So you can't blame the parents for what they're doing. It sucks that they had to get tased, that they had to get pepper sprayed, that they had to get tackled, placed in handcuffs. It just adds to the all-around horrible situation that's already taken place inside that school. All right, so a U.S. Border Patrol tactical unit, BORTAC, what we talked about earlier, this agent rushed to the scene after receiving a text from his wife, who was a teacher at the school. Prior to this, the officer had been off duty before receiving the news, so he had already gotten off his shift, and then gets a text from his wife that there's an active shooter, please help. The officer immediately set out with a shotgun his barber had lent him, and arrived on scene approximately an hour after the first responders arrived. Now, I don't have the details on this, but it sounds like he was at the barbershop getting his hair cut, and then he gets a text from his wife, active shooter, please help. So he asks his barber, you got a gun? The barber said, yeah, I got a shotgun. He grabs the barber shotgun and heads down to the school. He arrives on scene an hour after the first responders arrived. Additional Border Patrol and Customs Enforcement agents arrived, but they did not have a battering ram or other breaching tools, which is what you need to enter a locked door. So a U.S. Marshal on scene provided agents with a ballistic shield. The suspect stayed in the classroom for about 1 hour, hiding behind a steel door that officers weren't unable to open until they obtained a master key from the janitor. So there's a lot more to this. They can't just bust it in because they didn't have the battering ram. They didn't have any breaching tools. So they get a master key from the janitor to open this. Now I want you to think about for a second. It's different to have a battering ram where you don't have any way for the suspect to know you're about to come through the door, right? And you can bash this door open and dominate the room. It's another thing when you have to use a key to enter that door. You don't have that momentum. How freaky that must have been. After the door was unlocked, a BORTAC agent entered the room holding the shield, followed by 2 other Border Patrol agents, a Border Patrol search, trauma, and rescue agent, and at least 1 sheriff's deputy entered that room. The suspect reportedly opened fire at the group from a closet in the room before officials returned fire and killed him. As Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District, police officers exchanged fire with the suspect. BORTAC agents joined them in response to a request for assistance. 1 sustained an injury. According to Governor Greg Abbott, the injured Border Patrol agent fatally shot Ramos. Now, I saw a picture of a hat. I don't know if you guys saw this. I saw a picture of a hat where there was a bullet that ricocheted off the top of the hat. I wonder if that was his. All right, let's talk about timeline. I'm going to give you guys a breakdown of the timeline of events. So, just sometime after 11, the suspect shoots his grandma. 11:28, he crashes his grandma's truck in a nearby ditch and exits the vehicle armed. So, remember, he had texted that girl, I'm going to shoot my grandma. Then he shoots his grandma. Then he texts her, I just shot my grandma. 15 minutes after he shoots his grandma, he sends her a text, I'm going to go shoot the school up. 15 minutes later, he actually crashes at 11:28 in the ditch. 2 minutes later, first 911 call placed by a teacher who saw Ramos while a U.S. Marshal Service received a call for assistance from an Uvalde police officer. The teacher enters the school through a propped open door and shuts the door, but the door does not lock itself despite being designed. So, the door was actually propped open. The teacher sees the door propped open, runs to the door, enters the door, and closes it where it's supposed to lock, but it didn't for whatever reason. I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of that later. So the suspect who's outside begins shooting into the classroom at 11:31. So he crashes the car at 11:28. Within 2 minutes, he's outside the school, starts shooting into classrooms from the outside. This is the same time the patrol officer arrives, but had seen a teacher who he thought was a possible suspect and was focused in on him, drove right by the actual shooter. So 2 minutes later at 11:33, Ramos enters the school through the same door that teacher went in and begins shooting at interconnected classrooms 111 and 112. So he runs in, goes into the first room that he can and starts shooting. At 11:35, 3 police officers enter the school and approach the closed door to the classroom Ramos is in. He fires shots at the officers, grazing 2 of them. 4 more officers enter the school. So we are talking about 11:35, guys. So that means he starts shooting at 11:31 from outside the classroom. So he's outside shooting into the classrooms at 11:31. Within 4 minutes, he's already shot all those kids. And then 3 police officers enter the school and approach the closed door. So 4 minutes after he starts shooting, officers said, that's an incredible response time. I don't even know how that happened, to be honest with you. That's an incredible response time. 3 minutes is fast. So at 11:42, 7 minutes after those 3 police officers approached that door and he shot at them, 7 minutes later, a teacher reportedly texts someone that there's an active shooter on the school grounds. At 11:43 is when the school announced on Facebook there was a lockdown of the school due to gunshots in the area, saying students and staff are safe inside the building. I don't know why they would have said that. Maybe they didn't know about it was actually happening inside the school. I don't know. Maybe it was to calm people down. I don't know why they said that, but they said students and staff are safe inside the building. So the officers at 11:44 request more resources. They want equipment, body armor, and negotiators. The evacuation of students begins at 11:44. So guys, from the very first shot, which is 11:31, 13 minutes later, 11:44, officers have already requested more resources, body armor, negotiators, and started to evacuate students. That means within 13 minutes, they've gone from an active shooter to what they believe to be a barricaded gunman situation. All right, over the next 15 minutes, so by 12:03, 19 law enforcement officers gather in the hallway to the classroom, but do not enter the room that the suspect's in because the incident commander, Pete Arredondo, was treating the situation as one with a barricaded suspect instead of an active shooter. Arredondo believed that no more lives were at risk and he wanted more equipment and officers before conducting a tactical breach. So this is pretty typical. However, I will say, I recently heard that the police chief did not have a radio. So the police chief had called backroom or dispatch on his phone and said, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I want you guys to do. I don't know how real that is, but I know that there's some question as to how quickly that the police chief could speak to his officers and how quickly the officers could relay to the police chief, who's the commander on scene, what's actually happening. So that's a problem. That's something that's very simple, but I also understand how a police chief doesn't have a radio on him. They don't typically work with radios. I think maybe twice in my life, and if any fellow large police department officers are watching, I think I can count, I think maybe twice in my life I heard my police chief on my radio. They called him number one because that was his actual badge. It was called number one. And I can recall twice hearing him say, number one Central. And Central being like, standing by, number one. And he's like, tells us to do whatever we did. I forget even what he said. But I remember tripping out that I heard him. I think, and that was Louis K. Law. And I think something had happened in his district, like by his house. And so he was calling it in. Or maybe it was an accident. Maybe it was like a car accident that he was calling in. But I heard him go on the radio. So I know our chief, who has since been thrown in prison, federal prison, for framing somebody. I know that he carried a radio on him when he was off duty. Seems responsible to me. I don't know what happened. Maybe the dude's battery died. Maybe whatever. Maybe it was broken. I don't know. But I had heard that he didn't actually have a radio. All right, so at 12:03, that same time that the 19 other officers were gathering in the hallway, a female student calls from classroom 112, identifying herself and the classroom number. After 1 minute and 23 seconds, she ends the call. So she calls 911 and said who she was and what classroom number she was. But after 1 minute and 23 seconds, she ended the call. That same student calls again 7 minutes later. Ah, that's horrible. Another student in a student in classroom 112 calls 911 a third time, reporting multiple people dead in the classroom. Can you imagine having a student, a young, what are you in fourth grade? 9, 10, I believe. Can you imagine a 10-year-old having to call 911 saying there's an active shooter, all my friends are dead? Ah, so sad. So some members of the Border Patrol Tactical Unit arrived at the school at 12:15, which is what? Approximately 45 minutes after he crashed that truck. The student in classroom 112 calls and says she can hear police next door. She's asking the dispatcher for police to send help. And at 12:47, the classroom in 112 again asked 911 operator to send police. 3 minutes later at 12:50, Border Patrol agents use the janitor's master key to unlock the door that the suspect has locked. And they enter the classroom. The suspect, who's in a closet, kicks open the door and starts shooting. The officers open fire and kill him. That's crazy, guys. It's such a horrible thing, man. So I'm going to talk about the students now. We'll talk about the students who were killed. We have Nevaeh Bravo, 10. Jacqueline Jalen Cesares, 9. McKenna Lee Elrod, 10. Jose Flores, 10. Eliana Garcia, 9. Uzziah Garcia, 9. Amory Joe Garza, 10. Xavier Javier Lopez, 10. Jace Carmelo Luevanos, 10. Tess Marie Mata, 10. Miranda Mathis, 11. Alithia Ramirez, 10. Annabelle Guadalupe Rodriguez, 10. Maite Juliana Rodriguez, 10. Alexandria Anaya Rubio, 10. Layla Salazar, 11. Jaila Nicole Silguero, 11. Eliana Cruz Torres, 10. Rogelio Torres, 10. And then there was 2 teachers, Irma Garcia, and she's 48, and Eva Morales, who was 44. The children were in their 3rd and 4th grade classrooms, and all the students were 3rd or 4th grade. The teachers, Irma Garcia and Eva Morales, taught in the same 4th grade classroom. Joe Garcia, the husband of Irma Garcia, who was killed, one of the teachers killed in the shooting, he died 2 days after the shooting from a heart attack while attending memorial. His family said the heart attack was tied to the grief after losing his wife. This dude goes to memorial of his dead wife, dies of a heart attack, which we can all relate with. I cannot even imagine. So there were 18 people that were actually injured, not killed, just injured, including the alleged shooter's grandma, who lived, 2 police officers who did not die after they were shot. Abbott said the 2 officers were struck by bullets but had no serious injuries. Uvalde Memorial Hospital's CEO reported that 11 children and 3 other people were admitted for emergency care following the shooting. 4 were released, and 2, described only as male and female, were dead upon arrival. Several other victims were taken into the University Hospital at San Antonio. All right, so let's talk about the suspect. We're not going to say his name. But he was born on May 16, 2004 in North Dakota. He was a resident of Uvalde and a former student at Uvalde High School. He did not have a criminal record or any documented mental health issues. However, and we talked about this in my rising violent crime in Hawaii video that we just talked about, that I did my last live stream. We talked about how if you don't have a criminal record or any documented mental health issues, background checks aren't going to do anything. However, he had previously posted violent threats online. According to his classmates and some of his friends, Ramos had a stutter and a strong lisp, for which he was often bullied. He frequently had fistfights with classmates, occasionally with boxing gloves that he carried around with him. And he had very few friends. He was scheduled to finish high school in 2022, but his frequent absences made his graduation unlikely. He eventually dropped out of school. So this dude was a high school dropout from Uvalde. He had already dropped out. His social media acquaintances said he openly abused animals such as cats and would live stream the abuse on Yubo. I've never been on Yubo. Anybody been on Yubo? Other social media acquaintances said that he would also live stream himself on Yubo threatening to kidnap and assault females who use the app, as well as threatening to commit a school shooting. Ramos's account was reported to Yubo, but no action was taken up until a month before the shooting. The suspect worked at a local Wendy's and had been employed there for at least a year. According to the store's manager, he went out of his way to keep to himself when other people tried to reach out to him. One of his coworkers said he was occasionally rude to his female coworkers, that he would send inappropriate text messages and would intimidate coworkers at his job by asking him, "Do you know who I am?" The suspect's coworkers referred to him by names including school shooter because he had long hair and frequently wore black clothing. So they called him the school shooter before he ever shot up the school, you guys. They could tell, which is not a very unique situation. In situations like this, like, you hear about that. You hear people say, if anyone was going to do it, he was going to do it. A year before the shooting, the suspect started posting pictures to his Insta account of automatic rifles that were on his wish list. According to a friend of his, he would often drive around at night with another friend shooting at strangers with a BB gun and egging cars. According to a man who was in a relationship with the suspect's mom, the suspect moved out of his mother's house and into his grandparents' house 2 months before the shooting, after an argument broke out between him and his mother over turning off the Wi-Fi. People close to the suspect's family described his mother as a drug user and said he frequently argued with his mom. 2 months prior to the shooting, he posted a video of himself on Instagram aggressively arguing with his mom and referring to her as a bitch. This is daytime, and I know I might have kids out here watching this video. So the suspect's mom described her son as, quote, not a monster, but admitted that he could be aggressive. His grandfather said that his grandson did not have a driver's license and did not know how to drive, which is probably why he crashed it into a ditch. According to his father, the suspect had a girlfriend who lived in San Antonio. On May 14th, he sent private Instagram message reading 10 more days. The person responded, "Are you going to shoot up a school or something?" And he replied, "No, stop asking dumb questions. You'll see." That was on May 14th, guys. Ugh. 10 days before the shooting, the suspect sends a private message on Instagram. 10 more days. To which the person says, "Are you going to shoot up a school or something?" And he says, "No, stop asking dumb questions. You'll see." And 10 days later, just as promised, he shoots up the school. According to the Texas DPS, in September of 21, the suspect asked his older sister to buy him a gun, but she refused. Good on her. On May 17th, 2022, which was what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a day after his 18th birthday, he legally purchased a Smith & Wesson semi-automatic rifle from a local gun store. He purchased another rifle 3 days later. Ramos sent an Instagram message to an acquaintance he met through Yubo, which showed the receipt for an AR-15 purchased from Georgia-based online retailer Daniel Defense 8 days before the shooting. He posted a picture of the 2 rifles on his Instagram 3 days before the shooting. There it is, folks. Ahead of the shooting, the suspect had purchased 1,657 total rounds of ammunition, which included 375 rounds of 5.56 NATO ammunition purchased on May 18th. A total of 315 rounds were found inside the school, consisting of 142 spent cartridges and 173 live rounds. Additionally, a total of 922 rounds were found on school property outside the building, consisted of 22 spent cartridges and 900 live rounds. Dude, I don't know how he carried 900 live rounds. That's a lot of ammo, and that is not light. That's interesting. So they found 315 inside the school, 922 outside the school. So 937, 1237, 1,237 rounds. He had bought 1,657. So there was about 300 rounds that he had just recently bought that weren't on scene. Where's he getting all this money? Who can purchase? I don't even know anyone that can purchase 2 ARs and 1,600 rounds of ammo. And these are 5.56s. 223s. These are expensive rounds. Seriously, I mean, that's a lot of rounds. I mean, what's he paying? 50 cents a round at best? You're talking $800 to $1,000 in ammo, and each gun is $1,000. That's $3,000 this dude spent the day after he could. All right, so the suspect's parents. His mom said that she had no explanation for her son's attack on the school, but said that he had his reasons for doing what he did, and please don't judge him. I only want the innocent children who died to forgive me. His father apologized for his son's actions and said he should have just killed me instead of doing something like that. So I wonder if he had like dad problems. So the major development here, and something that you'll see on the news a lot, is that on June 1st, so 3 days ago, multiple unnamed law enforcement sources would say that the Uvalde Police Department and the Uvalde Independent School District Police Force had stopped cooperating with investigations soon after the DPS stated on May 27th that the police had erred in delaying entry into the classroom. The Department of Public Safety responded that the Uvalde Police Department and the Uvalde Independent School District Police Force have been cooperating with investigators, while specifying that the Uvalde Independent School District Police Chief, Pete Arredondo, provided an initial interview but has not responded to a request for a follow-up with the Texas Rangers that was made 2 days ago. Also on June 1st, Arredondo told CNN that he was, quote, in contact with DPS every day, end quote, and said he would not release further information about the events of the shooting while funerals are ongoing, citing respect for the families. Quote, whenever this is done and the families quit grieving, then we'll do that, obviously. All right, so when we're talking about the confrontation with the shooter, an armed police officer outside Robb Elementary School actually confronted the shooter. Before tactical units arrived, police officers inside the school, who numbered at least 19, made, quote, no effort, unquote, to breach the room where Ramos was located, according to the Texas Department of Public Safety. I'm interested, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm interested in how many students were alive at the time when he was in that classroom. He had shot all those students and was hiding in the closet because he knew they were going to breach that door. So he hid in the closet so that when they breached the door, they wouldn't know where to look and he would burst out of the closet and start shooting. That's where he went wrong. That's what ended up getting him killed. How many students were in the classroom, not shot, not dead? And why hadn't he shot them? Was he trying to save his ammo? Like, I don't know what that story is yet. I'm sure we'll find out as time goes on. According to DPS, the decision to wait for tactical units to arrive was based on the false belief that Ramos had been isolated to a classroom where he could do no more harm. Now, I think that the conflict here is that I don't believe that the police chief had a radio to hear what officers on scene were saying. And so officers on scene, I think, knew that there were other students in there, and there were people calling 911. There was a student calling 911 saying, send police, send police. She called 3 times. Meanwhile, you have the police chief on the phone telling his dispatchers, where you have a barricade situation, don't have anybody go in. You know what I mean? So if a dispatcher, it's her job, whether on your event channel or your TAC channel, whatever channel you have on your radio, which everybody on scene should have been on, she would have been able to say, hey, listen, we have students still in the classroom. They're saying, please help. He's in the closet. And then they would have known, the police chief would have known, everybody would have been on the same page. But when you got when you have a student calling 911 saying, please send help, you have the police chief calling 911 saying, do this, don't do that. And you don't have any way for his officers to communicate to him or hear what the girl is saying on 911. Now you have a problem. Now you have a communication problem. All right, at the May 26th press conference, when asked whether first responders had erred in waiting for reinforcements, DPS official Victor Escalon said he did not, quote, have enough information to answer that question yet. That was on May 26th, 2 days after the shooting. Separately, DPS spokesperson Chris Oliveras, in a media interview on the 26th, said that if law enforcement, quote, proceeded any further not knowing where the suspect was, they could have been shot. They could have been killed, and that gunman would have had an opportunity to kill more people inside that school, unquote. So the Uvalde Police Chief Daniel Rodriguez defended his officers in a statement on the 26th, the day of the 2 days after the shooting, saying, "It is important for our community to know that our officers responded within minutes." Former Austin and Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo tweeted this, quote, "We don't have all the particulars right now, but when gunfire is ringing out, police are trained, expected, and required to engage. That is a moral and ethical obligation." And he's right. On May 27th, the DPS acknowledged a number of law enforcement errors that potentially led to greater bloodshed. We don't know how much at the time. I'd really be interested in hearing how many students died after they decided not to go in. At a news conference, Stephen C. McCraw, a DPS director, said, quote, "From the benefit of hindsight, where we are sitting now, of course, it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision, period." So they're acknowledging it was wrong what they did. They should have went in and got him. I'm assuming they're doing that because they know that people died after that happened. Otherwise, this would be a non-issue. If no other students had died after they decided not to go in and all the bloodshed was already done at that point, then they technically had made the right decision. But the fact that they're acknowledging this probably means that some people died after that. I don't know. That's something we'll get into, I'm sure. On June 2nd, Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez said that he heard from the Commission on State Emergency Communications that Arredondo did not know of 911 calls being made by children trapped in a classroom with the suspect. Gutierrez said that Uvalde Police Department was, quote, "receiving 911 calls for 45 minutes while 19 officers were sitting in a hallway. We don't know if it was being communicated to those people or not." On June 3rd, Gutierrez said that he heard from DPS that Arredondo had no radio during the shooting. So we don't know. I don't know if that's true yet, but the rumor is that the police chief did not have a actual radio to listen to this stuff, to hear what was going on. And that is a problem. And I think that that would have been the end of a lot of the issues that we were having. Man, that's crazy. So what we know at this point now, based on everything that I just read to you, in hindsight, for basically 2 weeks later, less than 2 weeks later, the police chief didn't have a radio, did not know that students were calling from inside the classroom asking for help, told his officers, who I believe were probably ready to make entry, told them, "Stand by. You could cost more lives by going in." So they didn't go in. I can assure you that there will be some serious mental health issues with these officers who responded and who were on scene. I can assure you that some of them are thinking about suicide right now. I can assure you that some of them are depressed. If you know any of these people, what's up, Mana? Thanks for coming out, bro. I'm glad you came out all the way from Big Island. Are you guys in Kauai? I'm sorry. Kauai? Are you guys on Oahu right now? Good to see you, bro. Glad you joined me on a Saturday. I am willing to bet that there is some serious mental health issues going on with those officers. So if you know them, check in on them. Especially if I knew that I was on scene wanting to go in, but heard an order from my police chief to stay outside of the classroom, be prepared, wait for more equipment, wait for negotiators, and then I find out later that there were children calling 911 from inside that room. Guys, how dispatch works. It's not just one dispatcher or everybody can hear what's going on. Someone doesn't call 911 and you hear their call over the radio. How it works is the person will call 911. It will go to usually a prompt to say, do you want police, fire, or ambulance? Or you'll get a call taker that's police, fire, or ambulance. She's like a dispatcher. She just basically sends out calls. You say police, or you select it yourself. It routes to the call taker. The call taker is not the dispatcher typically that deals with the police officers. This call taker will take the call, will take the notes, decide what this needs to be classified as or what kind of response needs to be had. She will then add those notes and send it to a dispatcher. The dispatcher in a large city like ours, I don't know about Uvalde, it seems like a smaller city, in a police department, in a large police department like the one I worked for in Honolulu, she'll have 9 screens or something crazy that she's looking at. It literally looks like a cockpit full of screens. It's like a cockpit. It's like they're in a well with all these screens. She will then determine what she has to do, type in notes, send it to the appropriate responding officers, constantly communicating with them. However, she's also got up to 5 or 10 other officers that she's supposed to be keeping an eye on and she's sending to cases. There's a lot more going on at this time, I can assure you, not just what was happening at the school. So she's sending all these messages. So if the police chief calls in, he's probably not calling that call taker that routed it to them. He's probably calling some type of a back room, back channel, where he calls in to talk directly with one of the call takers. And so she's probably shouting to the dispatcher. She's either typing to her and she's in another room, or she's shouting to her in this big, it's like a pit with a bunch of desks. She's probably shouting to her and say, hey, the police chief says, tell all the guys to hold up, right? Then that dispatcher is on the air with everyone who is on that channel saying, number one's telling you guys to do this, 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 and that. Hold perimeter. Meet at this corner. Set up command post over here. Meanwhile, you have officers calling in saying, hey, this is what's going on. We got parents trying to get in. We're tackling them. We just OC'd somebody. Give me a report number for this. Like, there's so much stuff going on. And there's a car that's crashed, which is the suspects. There's ammo. There's a rifle that's got to be secured in the car. There's so much stuff going on. Meanwhile, you got 19 police officers, not all of which are from Uvalde. Like, you have a bunch of different types. Sheriffs, Uvalde County, Uvalde, the city of Uvalde. You got the Uvalde school district, the consolidated school district. And you have marshals, and you have border patrol, customs and border patrol. It's like, there's so much going on. So when that little girl called 911, she pressed 1 for police or whatever it was and tells the dispatcher, send more help, please. My friend's dying in here. 3 phone calls. This girl's shouting to this girl, hey, there's people inside. Meanwhile, the other girl's saying, hey, the chief says stand down. It is a nightmare in that dispatcher. And those dispatchers are going through some stuff right now. So if you guys know those dispatchers, reach out to them because they are going through hell right now, I can assure you. There are dispatchers that I'm sure heard the voices of people who are now dead. Children nonetheless. So thank you to all the dispatchers. You guys are heroes as well, and no one gives you enough credit for it. And you're also the lifeline of those police officers. And sometimes bad things like this happen. Dispatchers, they're simply the ones that are relaying information that command is making. And police officers are just following the orders of the decisions command is making. I know, with almost complete assurance, I know there were officers that were on scene that day that were being told not to go in, who wanted to go in, who were saying, we got to just go in. Why are we sitting here right now? We got to go in. Everyone else is saying, I don't know, so-and-so is saying we got to stop. Maybe he knows something we don't know. And unfortunately, in this situation, they followed their orders based on information the chief didn't have, probably because he didn't have a radio. So it's just those little things, man, where this suspect, he was able to do what he wanted to do. These guys had just been trained. So my heart breaks for the victims, and my heart breaks for the police officers, and my heart breaks for the dispatchers, for those families, man. It's a horrible tragedy. Seems like it could have been avoided. Seems like all the signs were there. This one was tough. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions, whatever questions you guys have. I'm going to start hitting the chat right now. What's up, Kai Lyons? How you doing, bro? Thanks for coming through. James Kisselberg says, everybody has an idea till you get punched in the face. Callie Connect says, I heard it was a jaw shot that came out her cheek. I don't know. I mean, I hadn't heard that yet. You may be right. You know how this is, we don't have all the information yet, but from what I just read, it was the forehead. Stone Wallace said, Governor Ige just signed some gun inspection bill. Not sure what this is supposed to do to stop evil. I don't either. I think that there's going to be a lot of people that are dealing with like the politics of it right now. A lot of politicians, a lot of scumbags, I might add, are going to capitalize on this on an opportunity to make political headway to try to take back some ground in their political careers. On both aisles, guys. I'm not talking about Republicans or Democrats. I'm talking about everybody. Let's not make this political right now. Don't do that. Because all you politicians are dirty. That drives me nuts when that happens. Don't talk politics at this time. Especially if you don't know what you're talking about. LJ Body, what's up, man? Tia Lisa Fernandez says, we have police in our schools here in Tracy, California. Good, I think they should. You know, there used to be this argument that I don't want my kids going to a school that has police officers. I don't want my kids feeling like they're going to school at a prison. There used to be the argument that said, I don't want my kids going to schools in metal detectors. What are they, caged animals? I mean, I never understood that. I never understood that. If you want to go to the Lions game or the Tigers game and watch them lose, you're going to have to go through metal detectors. You don't get in there and you're like, man, I don't want my kids to have to go to a Tigers game feeling like they're locked in a prison. You never say that. You're like, that's just a part of what it is. If you want to go to a thing that has this many people, there is a reason why they have metal detectors, folks, and that's because there's a lot of people in one area making easy targets. They're all lined up shoulder to shoulder. So we got metal detectors. I don't feel like a caged animal going to Comerica Park. I just don't understand that. I don't understand. I never went to Ford Field and was like, man, I feel like a caged animal. I never went to Little Caesars Arena in Detroit for a concert and thought, man, I wish I could go here without having, feeling like a caged animal. It just doesn't make any sense. Put metal detectors in our schools. Keep our babies safe. They can't protect themselves. They're easy targets. You cannot have an environment in which you have a target-rich environment full of babies and kids who couldn't stop you if they tried. They could hang on your legs and you walk right through them. Easy808 says, we protect banks and courthouses with armed security and screening. Why not our children? Exactly. That's how I feel. You have a target-rich environment with no protection. I don't even think one officer is enough. I'm sorry, guys. That's our kids. Those are our babies. One of the things that I heard just recently was they just had this training. And schools nowadays have this kind of training. I never had an active shooter training at my high school, but I know that they do this stuff now. And what I had heard was that the shooter had just gone through this training at his school and that he understood the process of active shooter, which may have helped him in his decision making on what he should do. I also believe he knew he was going to die. I don't think he cared. So when you have someone who knows the process of how you try to save lives and then doesn't care if he loses his, that is the perfect scenario for a high level of fatalities and, in our case, loss of life. What happens to be our babies, our children. Kiona Ona says, the Hawaii public schools do as well, but retired and unarmed. Good for them. That's what it should be. Brookhart Wolf said, bad guys with half a brain always look for, quote, lucky opportunities, no matter who they deal with. Yeah, I will say that a lot of times their success is based on the kinds of opportunity. They shoot where they can. They shoot where they can actually get people. Sometimes they're overwhelmed with targets, like in a target-rich environment like here. Sometimes like so many kids to shoot, who do you shoot? That's how they think. They go in there and they're just like, what do I do? And so we talked about this in other videos, and I'm going to do a quick recap so you guys understand what goes into breaching a room when you have an active shooter. let's say in this case they stack up in an I formation, or they do a T formation, or they do a cross, whatever they want to do. They stack up, they get ready to enter this room. They all have to enter through the door one at a time. That's the nature of a doorway, is you really can't fit 2 people through a door without getting stuck. And you don't want to risk that in something like this. So they stack up. Let's say they had 4 people. I forget what this said. I think they did said 4. They stack up in a 4. As soon as you break through that doorway, how this works is if this is the wall and this is the door that you're going to go into, right? You have police officers lined up on this wall, getting ready to go inside this room, okay? So they'll line up 4 deep. They'll all put their hands on each other's shoulders. They're ready to go. You have one guy facing the other way, watching the back. I don't know about in this case. They may have known that they isolated him, and in that case, you don't need anybody watching your back. But I don't know what they did here. So you have this opening. This is the door right here. The officers line up. They run into the room, and they will start to split off or follow each other into the room. They don't go deep into the room. They will go broad. The reason why is if they ran into something, you have a guy right behind you who's holding your shoulder, that as you squeeze up and you go in the room, he's following you. So if you run into something and you're stuck there, then you all get stuck in a line like a traffic jam. Then the suspect just starts shooting at that door and he gets all of you. So when you're lined up on that wall, that exterior wall outside the room, you go in that room and you peel. And guys will follow you. Typically doors are not in the center of a room. Like if the room is like this, there's typically not a door here. Typically, if the room is like this, the door will be over here to the side, so that when you go into the room, you can either go straight or you can make a right, but you can't go left. It's usually a wall. Typically, it's how rooms are set up, and there's reasons for that. So when they go in the room, they can either go straight or go right. And typically, you'll peel off, depending on what you're taught or whatever training you guys are comfortable with in this school, and you would have gone through this before. So you breach into that room, and you dominate. What dominate means is you create many targets for the shooter, who, by the way, is already trained on that doorway. He knows that's where you have to come in. He doesn't have to focus on anything else in any other part of the room. He's just trained in on that doorway. So if this is the wall and you guys are lined up here, and you can either go straight in the room or peel to the right, and the suspect's over here somewhere just pointing a gun at that doorway. You create a target-rich environment for him and multiple threats so that he's panicked about you. So you run in the door and you just create space. You don't stay by the door. And that's hard to trick your brain to do, because your brain wants to stop you and he wants to look first. Your brain wants you to enter, start scanning the room, and stop and get your scan so you can shoot the guy. Because the more steps you take in your head, you're thinking, this is more time that he's following me and going to shoot me. But that's not how the brain works, especially when you provide multiple targets. So as he comes inside that room, or as the officers enter inside that room, that first guy comes around the corner, he aims at him. But as he's aiming at him, he sees another guy come through the door. So he aims at him. And then another guy, and then another guy, and they are all moving. There's too many opportunities, and you've just overwhelmed his decision making. You have basically short-circuited his decision making. You threw a bug in it. He normally would just shoot at the first guy, but when he saw the second guy, the brain is like, there's too much going on. So that's typically what you would do. You enter that room, you create a target-rich environment by giving multiple opportunities for him to shoot several different people. Meanwhile, as you run in that room, you start to train your eyes towards looking for the suspect. So they entered the room, he hears them, he opens up the closet and starts firing. They had trained muzzles on him, and they took him out, killing him. I don't know where they shot him or how many times, but he was dead. So I said that I'd talk about that, so I just wanted to get into that with you guys. So you know what I mean about dominating the room and when you enter the room. And they were waiting for that. They wanted to go in there and dominate. And the reason for that is because it would stop the threat. So the questions I have moving forward that we'll probably do a video on when we find out later is how many people died after those officers were ready to breach that door. When they showed up and he shot at them at the door and they backed off and set up a perimeter and called for more equipment, how many people died after that? That would be interesting to know, because if no one died after that, then people are really making a big fuss out of them not going in. Nan says, hurt people, hurt others. When there's a common problem in humanity and human response is to ignore or bully. Yeah, this kid has definitely had problems. He definitely was mentally unwell. You have to be crazy to kill this many people. Nate Fleming says, you know, without throwing my homie under the bus, asking him why join the fire department, you sign up for the police department, fire department coaching job because you believe wholeheartedly if you don't, then nobody's going to be there. Yep. So Malai says, what you think would happen if parents were to brandish firearms and attempt to run in the school? Yeah. So that adds another thing. Remember what already happened. We already had the officer responding, the first officer responding to the scene. He drove past the actual suspect, chasing a teacher at the school who he thought was the suspect. So it is a fact that you want to keep the public from the scene while you're dealing with the scene because it's less people getting involved. And if other people ran in with guns, you don't know who the suspect is and you only have a split second to decide. And I can't tell you how many times there's been friendly fire, off-duty police officers, or just CPL carriers who got involved were shot and killed by police who they thought were a suspect, but they were really helping. That really happens, and the police aren't wrong for having shot them. So, unfortunately, you have children dying. And so you have to risk reward here. Kikaido, 1. Appreciate your vids. Mahalo. Well, thank you for the support. I appreciate you, man. That's a blessing. I appreciate you. Thank you. Mahalos for that. You're always out supporting, and I appreciate you. That's awesome. Thank you. So the thing is, on this situation, if I'm on scene as a parent who I carry a firearm, I probably go in, and if I get shot by cops, it is what it is. If I have a child on scene. That's what I'd like to think. But then I want you to peel back a minute and realize, like, then I have 3 babies that don't have a dad. And then I didn't add anything to the situation. Chain of command is real and it's valuable. Unfortunately, when the person in charge makes a bad decision, something like this happens. But when the person in charge makes good decisions, better things happen. And it's successful. And that's why having a police chief is important. And that's why having a good police chief is important. I think training is a must. There should be way more of it. But we can't say that it even worked in this situation because of the police chief. I truly believe you have officers willing to go in. Your added perspective is valuable. Man, again? Man, thank you so much. Mahalos for that. What is my perspective? My perspective, I'm an idiot, okay? I'm an idiot, but I just know that from an officer's perspective, I'm willing to bet that every one of those officers was ready to go in there. I have yet to hear that there was an officer who was told to go in who said, no, 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 no. I think we should wait. So far, maybe that changes. But as of now, I have not heard any stories of officers who didn't go in because they didn't want to. Right now, the narrative is there are officers who wanted to go in but didn't because they were told not to and they were following orders for the greater good. That's just what I think is happening. Callie Connect says that's why we were left outside, I'm sure. Some were left in the truck. Wendy's must be paying good. Yeah, man, how this kid came up with that kind of money and could just go buy. Listen, I don't care if he's 18 years old. I can assure you, I know what my son is spending his money on. That's a truth. And that's a red flag, by the way, on his 18th birthday that he buys 2 AR platform rifles and 1,600 rounds of ammo. Bronson Meyer says, I don't think there is a solution outside of armed security in school. I think that's the number one thing we can do right now. The number one thing we can do is armed security or police officers in school. That's the truth. Tia Lisa Fernandez, thank you for your dedicated work to inform us on these crimes. Thank you, Tia Lisa. Thank you for that. You're awesome. In the line of fire, exactly, Doug. How much does that much ammo cost? Where does a kid get that? Well, I'll look it up right now. So, on bulk cheap ammo, so if we're talking the cheapest ammo you can go with, 223 Remington, guys. If you're buying typical 55 grain, you're talking 37 cents a round at 1,000 rounds. So, $350 for 1,000 rounds if you're buying them in boxes of 1,000. And then if you're buying 20 rounds, there's 50 cents a round. He probably bought them in 1,000 rounds is what I'm guessing. And you're going to pay $200 for 500 rounds. So he's looking at a very minimum, if he bought them cheap, he's looking at least $600 plus tax for those rounds. And that's cheap. But we are talking about Texas. So it's possible he spent $600 on those rounds. That's what I would have guessed. Anyway. That's probably pretty accurate. And Easy808 says that DDM4 V7 alone is $1,600. Okay. Do we know what, did they release what type of firearm he used yet? Does anyone know? A DDAR? Yeah, Daniel Defense. So we're looking at $1,600. And then what was the other one they found? Does anyone know what that secondary gun was? So let's just say $1,500 on average for each AR, right? So we're looking at $3,000 plus $600 at the minimum. So we're talking $3,600 this kid spent right afterwards. And he says with EOTech optics. So I don't know about the optics. I don't know the furniture. I don't know any of that stuff that he had on it, but we're starting at $3,600 for what he spent. And he had tried to buy it through his sister. She said no. He had talked about shooting up a school. 10 days prior, he had told somebody 10 more days. And the kid was like, well, you going to shoot up a school? He said, no, stop asking dumb questions. You'll hear. You'll see it. You'll see what happens. $25 Actual says, could have bought ammo from a private seller at a discount. Priced to move. Also, Russian bulk ammo is cheap, yeah. True. I still think he's looking at $600. Because that's cheap. That's cheap. What's up, Nons? Good morning out there in Hawaii. On Big Island. Tia Lisa Fernandez says, when you pass any school, you see the patrol car inside the gated fence. They have their own office in the schools. That's how it should be. They mandate kids to go to school and they need to keep them safe. I agree. Tia Lisa said, we have tall fences and gates that lock after kids are in school. You have to pass security if you're late in order to enter the school. Beautiful. Beautiful. It's what I want to see. Brockhart Wolf says, too many soft targets everywhere. I agree. It's all soft targets at school. That's why you're a coward for going in there. You did it for a reason. You wanted to kill soft targets that wouldn't fight back. Benson Meyer says, I don't think getting rid of semi-automatic rifles will stop mass shootings like this. Also, mass shootings are just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to gun violence. I agree. Wow, Leigh's on Hawaii Island. So we got Leigh and Nans in Hawaii. Wonder how close you guys are. Mugshot Marley says, by the way, Daniel Defense, the brand of the shooter's AR, there's an option to finance monthly payments. Huh. You're right. I didn't think about that. What if it's not paid off? I think we'll find out what happens soon enough. Most kids would buy a car. You're right. Should have been a red flag. Benson says, Hawaii schools are super vulnerable to shooters. Wide open, anyone can walk in. That's the truth, man. That is the truth. Actually, you want to know who has a hard time getting in school sometimes? Or police. You guys, I used to go through schools on purpose whenever I got assigned to day watch, which I worked first watch, I worked nighttime in the shadow. I'd never worked in the daytime. I hated it. It was too hot. I had to deal with normal people who were just driving to work, trying to make money. I didn't like working with them. I wanted to deal with criminals. I just wanted to catch bad guys. So I'm working first watch. Whenever I worked the second watch, I would go to the schools that I was patrolling at nighttime, cleaning up the chronics and the high bail fugitives that were hiding there at night. I would go in there during the daytime when we got assigned to days. I would ride my bike or my ATV into the school property just to show presence, just to be like, this is where we're at. And this wasn't just me. There was other officers that did it too, until one day, one of the, what are they called? Administrators at one of the schools, I won't say what school it was, they called to complain saying that seeing police officers on school property was triggering for students and made them feel less safe. I can assure you this person just had a political agenda and didn't like police for whatever reason, and I get that. But we went in a back and forth with the administrators on what's appropriate for police activity on a school property. And check this out. Then after I moved back to Detroit, I remember seeing on the news, one of the teachers had recorded police officers on ATVs or bikes, I forget which one it was, probably ATVs, riding through the actual school. She videotaped them, she recorded them on her phone through the window, and then sent it into the news and complained that officers were scaring students. Two things about that incident. Number one, they were training. If you want officers to respond to the school in an emergency, but you don't allow officers to respond to the school to train, then when they show up at the school, it'll be the first time they've ever done it. I tell you what, I don't want the police officers that are going to respond to a shooting to have never done it at that school before. It should take place at schools. Yes, the big trainings on the weekends when the schools are closed, I get it. But to say that having police on property is somehow triggering or abusive of power is ridiculous. What you want is you want to create an environment between the students and the police that's hostile. You want the students to be afraid of the police because you have an agenda. We need our police to be familiar with our kids. Two things will happen. The police will know the kids, they'll know the families, and then the kids will grow up to maybe want to be police officers. And if you're trying to protect the kids because you think they have such a bright future, then you want those bright futured children to become police officers so that they can be the ones that respond in these crimes and make good decisions. So I think that in this case, all the precautions were made. They did training, active shooter training. The students had training. They had the doors that locked. They had closed caption. They had security cameras. They had a they have an officer at the school. They had 6 police officers that were in charge of the 8 schools at any given time. Now, keep in mind, they don't work every day, I'm sure. Probably rotate days. I don't know how their schedule works. That may be a thing too. But that's what I think we need. I think we need police officers in every school. I like police officers better than an armed security. However, I do like privatized police departments. I know it's going to make some people mad. But I like privatized police departments just because you don't have to deal with the unions as much. And you can hire based off of performance. And you can pay based off of how qualified they are. In Texas, they've done some privatized police departments in certain neighborhoods. I think in Dallas, Fort Worth. And there's sections of the city where some wealthy dude paid for police officers. Pays for their training, pays them a certain salary. They have certain protocols. And I think that that's something we need to be open to. So I like the armed security, but I think I like a private police department better, who can actually do investigations. So I don't know. That's just like something I'm throwing out. I'm not an expert in that. I don't know the politics of all that. Benson Mayer, these types of folks don't understand the big picture that administrator or teacher is foolish. I agree. Tia Lisa says, the police here are very nice. They play with kids in basketball and even dance-offs. They're all about protecting our kids. The kids feel safe. Where are you at, Tia Lisa? What island are you on? I'm guessing Oahu. Nate says, Lahaina resource officers were also football coaches. I like that. I like that. Come on now. I like having someone who knows the kids in their community. So when they show up on duty, they know what kids are having trouble. They know what kids are good kids. They know when something's out of place. Easy 808 says, my wife is a high school teacher here on Big Island. I just bought her a backpack armor plate. Wow, good. Oh, Tilly in Tracy, California. Good for you. I think I know somebody in Tracy. Cool. Thank you guys. Listen, I'm at what, an hour? I'm almost at 2 hours, guys. Thank you guys for spending most of your afternoon with me on a Saturday. I'm thinking about doing another video later tonight. I'm not really sure yet. We're working on it to see if that time's going to work out. And I'm going to try to knock 1 or 2 out tomorrow as well. So if there's anything that you want to talk about, go ahead and DM me. You can find me Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. You can email me at doug@dougkorenic.com. And just let me know if there's something you want to talk about. So, hey man, I appreciate you guys. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you want to see these videos next couple days. And go ahead and smash that like button for me. I would appreciate it. It really helps out the algorithm so that we can spread these videos. Thank you guys so much. Shout out to all my Patreons who came out. Love you guys. You guys are awesome. Be ready for chapter 7 on Monday of The Mailbox Conspiracy. Go check it out. All right, guys. I appreciate you. Mahalos for coming out. Shoots.